Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chasing Psychological Safety. Today's topic is a little bit strange for us. We very rarely touch the topic of the entire organization. As you know, we're a lot more about the team and results from the point of view of the dynamic at the team level. But we feel like today we'd like to talk to you about some of the things that we see in the organizations we're working with. These days, I think it's quite important that we take a step back and we reframe towards the bigger picture just from time to time, not always, very rarely. But when we do, also, it would be nice to do it with a view of what is it that we could change so that we see actionable results. In this particular case, we'd like to talk to you about what happens when an organization has systemic lack of psychological safety. And you can see that at various levels. You can see it in a lack of psychological safety at the top that we'll talk about in a minute. You can see it at various levels of the organization where the dynamics and the way that people interact are just not healthy and sustainable. And you can also see it in the way that people are reacting to this entire crisis. And some of the things we see a lot today is a focus really on resilience and a focus on engagement, which are both really good ideas, and we have to talk about them, and they're both components of psychological safety in our view. But what I think is important is that we think of them from the point of view of what else do we need to do? What kind of big thinking do we need to frame so that we can then focus on those two topics? We can't just talk about resilience and engagement and presume that they will take care of themselves and they are just two independent things. They are part of the bigger picture, and the bigger picture has a lot in the way of what we call human debt, what we have left undone from the point of view of human topics. So a couple of them that we're going to raise with you today, and of course there are many other ones, so we'd welcome a conversation.
Exactly. So as Dwayne has been saying, we don't usually talk about this, but we've been talking to, so many clients recently about psychological safety. It really reminds us what we see day to day in terms of those scenarios where there's an absence of psychological safety, to look at it from the slightly negative frame for a moment. So we'll talk you through a few of those. The first one really is the term that we can only land on for it is office politics. So something that can really cause a toxic team culture. So if you're looking, this can happen at a team level, and it can be embedded in a culture at an organizational level as well. But it boils down to a situation where a group of individuals, and it's not necessarily everybody in the team, but enough people to influence the team culture and the team feel and psychological safety in the team, have essentially, I always think of it as people have lost their way. So, they've become more interested in self than team and group, and what the group is trying to achieve together. There is a level of fear and lack of security and safety in the team such that they feel the need to protect themselves, and therefore the behaviors that come out can be very often defensive, which can translate into aggressive, which can translate into conflict, and not the kind of conflict that is good that we talk about in psychological safety, where people are constructively challenging for the very best ideas, but the kind of conflict that really creates situations where the team cannot move forward with its work, where the team is so mired in those office politics and that toxic culture that it can't move forward. And one of the other aspects of that, which can either come from or can turn into, is discrimination. So one of the scenarios, that can really create an absence of psychological safety is if you are consciously or unconsciously discriminating against somebody else in the team for any reason. And if that's occurring in a team, then we've very little chance of creating a psychologically safe, highly productive team. So that's really one to look out for.
Very true. So under the same umbrella to a degree, but a very different type of behavior, and a more insidious one, if you wish, is that when the team starts to, and the individuals in the team, they start to lose their common purpose. And unfortunately, there's no real way and no real test for that. There's no real way for us to know when it happens, and no test for it. The effects of it are going to be very clear. We're going to see a serious drop in psychological safety when they don't have an ability of working together towards the same goal. And it is obviously one of the things that Google has found as extremely important in their Project Aristotle, right up there in the first three things that a team has to have so that they're performant. But forget performance for a second. You need common purpose, at least at a certain level, to even be functional. It doesn't even matter if you're going to be really good or really productive, to even be functional, to even accomplish the things that are a minimum for your job as a team, you have to have a certain level of common purpose. And unfortunately, as I said, there's no way of really knowing when it's missing, which is why team leaders have to spend ridiculous amounts of time insisting on it and reaffirming it and doing these team relaunches that we talked about, doing various periodical hygiene exercises of team building, reaffirming why it matters, having a check of individual purposes happening and coming together. That common purpose as a team, though, is worth working on as a continuous behavior, because if you miss that, you're going to see really bad snowballing of negative behaviors down the line.
Absolutely, it's such an important part of a really great team. And the other thing that we've seen, and this has always been thus, but it is definitely magnified by the scenario that we're in currently, and is something that as teams and as leaders and as humans we really need to focus on as we continue to work in a flexible environment, and that is trust in your employees, trust in the people who work for you. And that can be a leader, working with their team. It can be the leader of a subgroup and the people that they're working with. It can be trust in your peers as well. But primarily we're talking about a situation where right now, very often you cannot physically get close to the people in your team. And there is a lack of trust in some teams. And we know where that comes from. It comes from needing to be in control. It comes from not wanting to screw up, excuse my language. It comes from not wanting to fail. But it isn't a productive way to behave in terms of your team. And now more than ever, we need to trust and focus on outcomes as opposed to presenteeism on Zoom and MS Teams and all the other conferencing tools that we're using, or focusing on the task only. That trust and that outcomes focus is something that is really going to make a difference in this flexible working world that we are permanently moving into.
Absolutely, and not only having it, but communicating it as well as a team leader. So it's not good enough that you believe that your people are doing their thing. It's also really important that you communicate this to them. So even if nothing comes up, you should still say, I know you've been doing this. You should still stop them from throwing themselves out there too much, from burning out. You should still stop them from working all hours if you can. You should still tell them that you trust them to get their stuff done. This ties into the whole idea of flexible working that we had been discussing with you over the last few weeks. It's really important that we reframe work around outcomes, around the fact that we trust each other, around the fact that we have a common purpose, and we're all just trying to do a good job. There are very few professionals I know that are in a team with the intent purpose of just skiving and just existing in there without really doing their best. At a certain level of our professional lives, we will want to bring our best self because it's self-fulfilling, right? There's so much good coming out of doing a good job that nobody who's ever done it is going to attempt to not do it again. So let's just give people the ability to do it. And of course, lastly, and maybe most importantly, and going back to what we said at the beginning, what is missing, if we're honest, whether we're a leader or a team member or at the lower level, is a degree of psychological safety at the top. So our leadership is unfortunately in a very tight spot right now. This is probably unlikely the time for them to be looking at these topics. They'll tell you that it's probably counterintuitive that they would sit down and look at their own selves and understand the dynamic of their leadership team. But it is also incredibly important that they do so, because it's not going to work for any team leader or leader at the top to be a lonesome wolf out there. We're going to need each other. This is a really tough period where we have to come up with innovative solutions. We have to completely redefine the way we move, the way we work. And to do that, we have to be in a team. To be in a team that's psychologically safe, we first of all have to be in a team. And let's face it, there's loads and loads of management teams out there, right, are not a team. That they are a collection of impression management occasions where people sit down and read each other's accomplishments and use it as a newsletter in person opportunity instead of a place to think of things together and create things together, which is what the team should be. So really important is that leaders have a sanity check in terms of teams. Are we a team? Are we a psychologically safe team? What can we do to quickly become a team fast enough to make a change with lower levels of our company? I think this is going to be critical in the period coming ahead, in particular from the point of view of the recession, in particular from the point of view of God knows what's going to happen pandemic-wise and how many more waves we are facing or not. Whatever happens, we are just about to enter a period of either recovery or another period of crisis, and we need to be a team. No one's going to get out of this while doing it alone, and no one's going to get out of this while pretending to be a team that doesn't have psychological safety. So yeah, an organization conversation for once out of us. We just wish you the best of luck. Do a team relaunch at the management level if you have to, but just kind of think of psychological safety, think of resilience and of engagement from the point of view of the bigger picture, and don't just kind of get bogged down into what your to-do is for the day. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.